we submit the essay. Vocabulary. When we talk about vocabulary, students often make the mistake of thinking they need to drop in every difficult word they've ever learned anywhere. That's a mistake. Oftentimes, students that are new to using these big words use them incorrectly or use them in a weird context, and that rings very falsely to the readers. So we don't need students to be dropping in every single word that they have ever learned while studying for the SAT. That said, as we talk about vocabulary, it is useful for students to have added some words over the course of the time they've been preparing for the exam. And there's certain words that can be used in every single essay regardless of the argument being made. For instance, the word compelling or the word underscore. Two compelling examples that underscore this thesis are blah, blah, blah and blah, blah, blah. So there are a couple of words that you can have students ensure that they know in order to make the essay itself come out much stronger than just using simple vocabulary. More important than using big words, however, is to be concrete. One of the biggest mistakes that students make when making arguments is they're way too general. The world is getting better. That's vague. What would be much more powerful is to say the world is improving with regard to transportation and the evolution of the railroad and the automobile and the airplane has shrunk the globe, and in this shrinking, our lives have improved. Or technological advances in medicine have allowed people to live longer, and the world is no longer ravaged by terrible diseases like it used to be. It's about being concrete rather than vague. Keep students from writing phrases like, throughout history, this is obviously true. Those things don't accomplish anything. So be specific when you're actually making the argument. And remember that there's a difference between saying something and proving it. You can't argue simply by assertion. Announcing that people are motivated by selfish desires is very different than laying out the specific, concrete, selfish desires that motivated bad actors in the history of the world. When we're talking about language, it's also important to understand that varying sentence styles is important. Beyond vocabulary, the variety of sentences can prove the facility with the English language. For instance, a simple sentence, having just a single clause. I like cats. My science partner smells like onions. These are simple sentences. They're direct and they're to the point. Often students confuse length with sophistication. I remember when I was in high school, if I wrote a sentence that stretched on for line after line after line, I thought that I was writing at a higher level. Well, now that we're older, I think we can all collectively agree that writing a sentence that takes up an entire page is actually pretty hard to penetrate. So length isn't the only consideration. Sometimes having a single direct clause can be a very strong way to make an argument. But if every sentence is, I like cats, or my science partner smells like onions, we're probably not doing our writing style justice. So it's useful to have compound sentences as well. What do I mean by a compound sentence? That's two or more independent clauses stuck together. For instance, I like cats, but John does not. Using conjunctions like but can be an effective way to demonstrate that a student has a greater use and command over the English language. Remember, when using the word however, by the way, which of course has shown up in earlier lessons around the sentence improvement section, that however in the middle of the sentence is actually an adverb and not a conjunction, and students should be using semicolons. There's nothing worse than having students try and write in a more sophisticated fashion and then use a word, but use it in a way that actually creates a run-on sentence. I confess that all throughout high school, I did not know that however in the middle of a sentence between two clauses was different than the word but. Yet I have learned that since then. So as you help students create compound sentences, make sure they're punctuating them accordingly. As a great exercise, what you can do is you can create sentences or pull from reading passages or pull from articles or pull from other students' essays and have the students engage in the exercise of combining them to create more sophisticated sentences or breaking them up to create simpler sentences. Finally, beyond compound sentences and simple sentences, you have complex sentences. That's one with an independent clause and a subordinate clause. For instance, although I like cats, John apparently does not. Or my science partner, who sits next to me every day in biology class, smells like onions. Of course, because we've touched on subject-verb agreement at the beginning of our grammar lessons, we've highlighted how phrases surrounded by commas can be effective ways to add description to the subject, even when they're not the subject themselves. Again, a very easy exercise to engage students in is to have them create more sophisticated sentences, having gone from the simplest to the compound to the complex and building one on top of another. Beyond sentence structure and beyond vocabulary, the other key part of language is, of course, the grammar. Remember, this is a grammar test, so messing up grammar is not good. When we take a look at the grammar section, or we take a look at the grade that goes into the grammar, understand that the readers recognize that a student in 25 minutes has only so much ability to go back and revise. So we don't want students obsessing over grammatical mistakes. That said, in order to avoid the appearance of lack of grammatical skill, students should reread their work. Now, in 25 minutes, if we've spent a couple of minutes outlining and we've been writing as much as we can to get past a page and a half, rereading the entire essay may not really be all that possible. So what can we do? Focus on the opening paragraph. One of the biggest mistakes that students make is they have a series of pronoun issues, run-on sentences, awkward phrasings, all caught in the first paragraph. If the first paragraph is the first impression for the reader, at least correcting the grammar in the opening paragraph can make a huge difference. We've talked about the essay in two distinct parts. We've talked about it in terms of development, and we've talked about it in terms of the actual execution of the essay beyond development and organization, in terms of the style of the essay. In order to bring all of these to some effective conclusion, after you've laid out these key components of the grade, it's useful to take a look at the sample essay topics that appear on the next page. We lay out a series of assignments, Essay 1, Essay 2, Essay 3. They have prompts and they have questions. As you'll notice, they go in a lot of different directions. Good instructors don't just use the essay topics as we've laid out, they go create their own. Find a piece of writing that you find interesting that has a provocative passage, cut that into 2 or 3 sentences, and then write a question underneath. One of the other things that I really like to give students is have them find a prompt that they find interesting and create an assignment for the class. This is an easy way to have students become more engaged in the creation of lessons that are actually relevant to their daily lives. Just because we set these out as big picture essay topics because the SAT does that, doesn't mean that you can't utilize your class time to create smaller bite-sized opportunities for students to engage in meaningful thought processes to actually make an argument. Oftentimes, it can be incredibly valuable for students to set up on opposite sides of a particular question and allow them to debate. Again, all of the subject matter that is contained in the SAT has a larger implication for knowledge and execution of that knowledge. What are we talking about here? Well, creating arguments and supporting those arguments with evidence and recognizing that the other side of an argument also might have evidence in support of its argument is an effective and valuable classroom experience. So taking a look at the essay and understanding what goes into the score is certainly important. Making sure that the students have an opportunity to practice it, be able to write multiple essays, is also a really big opportunity. After the sample essay topics, we create outlines for students to take advantage of. Use these outlines as you find them to be necessary for your class, or have students create their own. The final thing to remember about the essay is that it's just not that big of a score mover one way or the other. Don't let the essay occupy too big of a line of importance in a student's mind, and make sure that they're focused on building their grammatical skills, because the multiple choice side of the essay, of the writing section, carries more weight overall. Teaching subject verb agreement, pronoun agreement, and parallelism will have a bigger impact on scores than just the essay. That said, having assignments that focus on writing in the background of a lot of the classroom work that you're already doing can be a very effective way to not just build skills for this test, but also for the rest of their lives.